clicker. Can you all hear me okay? For those who know me, this will be the slightest PowerPoint presentation you will ever see me give. And it's one slide. They say good ideas start with napkins, and this is actually a napkin. This was drawn on an Amtrak train, and I was talking to a buddy of mine, this is several years ago. We were talking about immigration, and as you heard a lot of people say over the course of the day, and you will hear said a whole lot more in future events such as this and future discussions, is that we need to do a bunch of things in order to make it easier for businesses to obtain labor. Well, what this buddy of mine and I were talking about is, okay, well, how do you operationalize that? How do you actually make that happen? So what we did was, I drew the map. Obviously, you can tell I did not go to cartography school. But it kind of resembles the southern United States and kind of resembles Mexico. But the general concept of this is, does anybody here not know what Ellis Island is? Does anybody not know? Everybody knows how that worked, right? It's generally conceived to be one of the shining examples of how immigrants came into this country. The boats pulled up, the people got off, they had a rudimentary health check, they had to sign a document saying that they weren't going to be a burden to society, and basic rules of the immigration game at that time, they were generally allowed in. Now they sent a bunch of folks back, but a lot of people came in. Not my family. We got here in the 1820s, so Ellis Island wasn't around at that time. But anyway, so the notion is to put Ellis Island centers along the border. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, one, it takes the people who are trying to cross into this country for work out of the desert. There have been a number of speeches that I've heard where folks from the Border Patrol and ICE have said that if you get the immigrants out of the deserts, so I don't have to look for them, it makes my job of securing the border a whole lot easier. And so this does that. So how do you then, how do you operationalize this? Really pretty simple. And I'm sorry for my friends in the legislature. I don't envision this being some kind of legislation that requires thousands of pages of legislation. You don't have to write a lot of stuff, I think, to do this. But generally, sorry to pick on you. But if you're an employer and you have a need for labor, you advertise these jobs on the internet. Mexico has the internet. There's a lot of countries that have the internet. And so you set up like a job board, like a Monster or Career Builder or whatever it is. And these employers who have these jobs list them in the service. And that accomplishes a couple things. One, it gives us a tally of what kind of jobs employers are looking for. Two, it allows them to follow existing immigration law, which says you have to advertise that you need domestic workers. So the people who are looking for work, who might want to do these types of jobs, they can see that they're available as well. When a set amount of time goes by where these jobs aren't filled, then they become open to people who are immigrants. And then that kicks off, again, an existing process where if you want to get a work visa in the United States, you have to have a job here in the United States. But the question is, how do you find out if there is a job for you in the United States? Well, that's how. There would be fees that would help underwrite this service. If think about it, if the same amount of people who were crossing the border and paying coyotes, who then use that money for other stuff we don't like, paid Uncle Sam to process them, do the math. That's a lot of money. And if if you're talking about 6,000 people per day, which is the number that FAIR and CIS use, you're talking about $4.3 to $7.6 billion per year. Now, if you think of that money going into the cartels, no wonder they can buy so many weapons. No wonder they're so powerful. So another part of this is you take the money out of the cartels and give it to people who can actually help deal with the process. Employers would have to supply information to the government of where these people are working. Again, just like that is consistent with existing law. Workers would be able to change jobs, but again, there would have to be some notification. We have to know where these people are. If you think about where these centers are located on the border, it would stimulate economic development. How? Well, the people have to buy clothing, they have to stay before they cross into the country. Likewise, on the other side, you're going to have to hire more people to work in these processing centers. That creates jobs. You create jobs, it creates incomes, it creates economic growth, it creates tax revenues, fairly simple thing. Another important part of this is that people who work here would be allowed to go home. They wouldn't have to stay on this side. There wouldn't be the need for them to bring their young families with them when they come to the country. I don't know about you, but if you're a newlywed, probably the last thing you really feel like doing is leaving your wife or your husband, on the other side of the border. Maybe that works for some people, but I don't know. That's usually not how it works. And the effect that has is that you don't have to worry about, I hate the phrase, the whole anchor baby thing. Because if people are home and they can go home, just like they used to do 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have these problems. So the demands of the other types of provisions of services and other things that they're criticized for would diminish. In fact, somebody mentioned the work of, I just drew a blank on his name, for the Mexican Migration Project. Doug Massey, thank you. His study shows that 85% or more of the people who come here prior to the '86 law self-deported. Why wouldn't that happen again if we had a mechanism in place that would allow them to do that? Finally, I think enforcement is important to this. You can't just do it without it, so you would have to have some mechanism that would penalize employers who continue to break the law. They should be significant penalties. People who break the law and consistently do that should not get a free pass. The people that I've spoken to about this project don't think that it requires any kind of amnesty. Again, if you look at what Massey was talking about, and that a lot of the folks would just like to go home. So anyway, with that, that's kind of our idea and our approach to this, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.